Sicily, the morning of July 10th, 1943. The Allies were attacking, with 180,000 assembled. But the Axis was waiting, with over 400,000 men. And so, as Patton and Montgomery led their armies ashore, there were questions that could only be answered on the battlefield. Tonight, A&E looks at the invasion of Sicily through two classic television shows, Battle Line and 20th Century, hosted by Walter Cronkite. And now, Operation Husky, a 50th anniversary remembrance.
This is Walter Cronkite reporting. Today we present the story of a battle which opened the first bridgehead for the Allied return to the European continent in World War II. After this bitter fight, the American general, George Patton, told his victorious soldiers, "Your deeds in Sicily will fill the pages of history for 1,000 years." This is our story, Invasion of Sicily. May 13th, 1943. Tunis has fallen. The Africa Corps is destroyed. To British names, Montgomery, Alexander, America can now add her list of victorious leaders: Bradley, Patton, Eisenhower, and Airmen Spots and Doolittle. The Allies control the air from African airfields, but the enemy can still strike fitful blows from Italian airfields, even though we strike them day and night. Three things must now be done: make the Mediterranean safe, knock Italy from the war, ease pressure on the Russians by engaging German divisions. An invasion of Sicily offers the opportunity to achieve all three aims at once. First, however, the tiny island of Pantelleria in the narrow sea alley between Tunisia and Sicily must be won. 12 million pounds of bombs will fall, and on June 11th, when British infantry land, the Italian defenders give up. The first surrender ever induced solely by air bombardment. We have a fighter base to cover the beaches of Sicily. The generals debate the plan. The British, like Montgomery, want a concentrated blow in one place. George Patton, like other Americans, prefers a giant envelopment. The original plan for Operation Husky has a U.S. assault in the west, a British assault in the southeast, crushing the enemy in a pincer. The British prevail. Both forces will hit the southeast corner. To Alexander, envelopment means weakness in the middle. Montgomery wants to smash one big gap. One of his commanders, General Oliver Leese.
But General Montgomery was very nervous, rather naturally at that moment, of mines. We were frightened of being shot up, tearing up the mines by machine guns in front of barbed wire on the beaches. We'd had an absolute plethora, an absolute kind of bellyful of mines, the whole way up, really, from Alamein, well beyond Tripoli, up to Tunisia, really. So we pressed very, very hard that we should land in two places. Ourselves on the right, the Americans on the left, and very, very close together.
July 8th, D-2. A fair day, and 3,000 ships bearing 7 divisions are at sea. They converge from Algeria, Tunisia, the Middle East. One division comes direct from the United States, another from England. The navies are in perfect harmony with the soldiers. The American admirals even agree to carry the Army's Arab donkeys on their ships. The next day, high winds spring up. The force is now in danger of being scattered. General Lucian Truscott.
I command the 3rd Infantry Division, reinforced, totaling some 50,000 with the administrative troops. We're loaded completely in shore-to-shore craft. These flat-bottom craft are very comfortable when the water is very smooth, but unfortunately we ran into a storm at sea. It was extremely rough, and the men on board these landing craft suffered seasickness very, very seriously. And believe me, when they saw a beach, they were very happy to land on it, even against opposition.
From Africa, Malta, the Middle East, our air power isolates the battlefield. The airmen also drop airborne infantry. General, then Colonel James Gavin.
Well, the 82nd Airborne Division was given the mission of sending a reinforced regimental combat team in on the night before D-Day. Now, this was quite without precedent in our history. We'd never done anything near the size of this. I should have 35-mile wind from west to east. Well, now, normally our training practice had been not to jump in more than a 15-mile wind, because jumping is hazardous enough alone with a 35-mile additional increment of velocity to your speed. But there was nothing to do about it. Here we were going in, couldn't turn back then. Besides, we had made it a policy that every man would jump. Even if the plane was lost and didn't know where it was, nobody would come back to Africa. Everybody went in, and they would do the best they could if they were alone. So we had to go, and we did.
Each hour approaches. Only the plan, etched on the minds of thousands of frightened men, can tell the tale. Paratroopers are dropping behind the beaches. Omar Bradley's dime and cent forces land around 3:30 a.m. The 1st Division at Gela. The untried 45th at Sicily. Joss, under Truscott, hits Licata. At dawn, the plan is in control. Somehow thousands of small, confused events and individual acts have shaped themselves to the inexorable plan.
Force ours was jumped about 30 miles to the east of Gela. And the troopers really scattered then all the way from the British sector away up beyond Gela, and they were in front of the 1st Division, the U.S. 45th Division, and the British forces down below. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because the Germans and the Italians were thoroughly confused. They thought there were about 3 to 4 times as many paratroopers as they were, and the paratroopers just had been trained to fight the best they could on their own. Wherever they encountered a pillbox, they attacked. Wherever they encountered any forces, they attacked them. They ambushed vehicles on roads, cut communication lines, and so on. By in daylight, I had gotten together well, I had 25 people during the night. And the confusion of the fighting was such that daylight I only had about 8.
D-Day, July 10th, 1943. Dime, cent, and Joss pour ashore. Operation Husky is the largest single beach assault in history. By smashing enemy aircraft on the ground, forcing his airfields back, the air forces have spared the Allies the major enemy air offensive they fear the most. But enemy dive bombers still can stab at ships loaded with precious tanks and guns. This assault sees landing ship tanks, LSTs, for the first time. New pontoon causeways are used to cross hidden sandbars. The plan does not depend upon seizing a major port. The invasion is to be supplied over the 100 miles of open beaches. Our lack of interest in a port and the landings despite bad weather surprised the enemy. By noon of D-Day, Joss' force has Licata, and Truscott's troops plunge inland. Meanwhile, during the night, the British have landed on the right. The wind-scattered airborne, the Canadians and Highlanders on Pachino Peninsula. 2 more divisions, 2 brigades, further right toward Syracuse. The Sicilians do not know or care that Mussolini has bellowed that the Allies will be defeated at the water's edge. The British 8th Army pushes out, looking for the 75,000 Germans on the island.
My job was to go straight on. We captured quite a few Italians. We were getting in like it, and we came up against no German resistance at all. Didn't really mind how many Italians there were in the place at all. They didn't really come into the issue, but the point was really what the German resistance was going to be.
The Germans first appear in front of the Americans. On July 11th, Hermann Goering Panzers pour onto the plain behind Gela. Enemy air attacks the night before have burned an LST with needed tanks and guns. A morning mist at Pantelleria keeps air support on the ground. The riflemen fight the wave of steel with infantry weapons. They overrun, and the panzers get within 1,000 yards of the beaches. Now fire control parties, combined Army and Navy, coordinate fire from the wall of ships offshore. It is the first time the Army has fully trusted Navy guns to support troops on shore. Radar, heroic spotting plane pilots, shore parties create a new invasion weapon. The riflemen clean up amid the smashed German armor. The 82nd Airborne, still behind enemy lines, plays a vital part.
We lost a lot of people, buried about 50 on the battlefield right where we fought them, but we handled them well. Knocked out, took 3 of their tanks, 12 big mortars, lots of trucks, and drove them out. I later found out after the war that, as a matter of fact, that the Hermann Göring Division commander was relieved of command as a result of that fight and his lack of aggression. Well, I don't know. That's the way it goes.
Air, sea, ground coordination does not always work, leading to tragedy. On July 11th, the Air Forces give short notice of a night drop of 2,000 paratroopers to reinforce Patton's new 7th Army. The Germans also mount an air attack. The troop carriers arrive immediately after. Only partly warned, conditioned by 2 nights of bombing, ground troops and ship's gunners shoot down transports, machine gun paratroopers, thinking they are Germans. 23 troop planes are lost. More than 20% of the paratroopers are casualties. Who to blame is still debated. That same day, the British take Syracuse. They also meet German tanks in front of Augusta. They enter the city, but are forced out by the crack Italian Napoli division. Augusta falls on July 14th. The perennially hungry Sicilians, the last to embrace fascism, are the first to see it go. In Rome, Il Duce is beating his breast and shouting, "The occupation, it must not come." But in East Prussia, even Hitler sees that it has come and accepts Field Marshal Kesselring's plan for a delayed withdrawal from Sicily. Meanwhile, the Sicilians, invaded by ancient Greek, Roman, Carthaginian, Vandal, Norman, and Arab, settle down to enjoy the new invasion. July 17th, the invasion is 8 days old. The Germans now have their own plan. Withdraw from the west, fighting rear guard actions on the few roads, the many mountains. Concentrate at Catania and stop the British drive to Messina. Behind shortened lines, escape. Thus, General Patton is under orders to go slowly north, and the enemy is already slipping east. Patton impatiently orders an armored sweep to Palermo, the infantry clearing mountains on his right. Truscott's 3rd Division, superbly trained in forced marching, fights the 100 miles from Agrigento to Palermo in just 4 days. Foot patrols beat the tanks into the city on July 22nd. It is the major port, the largest city on Sicily. Palermo holds few Germans, but offers Italian prisoners in burdensome numbers. The blazing sun has been merciless, Truscott writes. Every plodding footstep brought thirst for which there was all too little water. In the east, on the Catania Plain, a major battle is developing. Montgomery needs a bridge across the Someto River, and a British paratroop drop brings another weird coincidence. The Germans also drop paratroops at the same place, at the same time, to hold the same bridge. The 200 British paratroopers fight all day, but are outnumbered. The ground forces rescue them and take the bridge. The British can now see Catania 5 miles away, but the delay has permitted Hermann Göring panzers, the Napoli division, and other enemy units to deploy as an aggressively defensive army. Montgomery calls on his reserves and attacks. By July 16th, the frontal attack for the narrow coastal shelf between Mount Etna and the sea proves too costly. Montgomery rests the 8th Army in defensive positions while 7th Army is turned eastward to link with his units in the north. Then Montgomery will swing a left hook around Mount Etna. On August 1st, Montgomery leaves the Catania Plain, goes to the hills north and west.
I think the days when we were fighting away on the west side of Etna were the most frustrating days that I ever had during the war. We were fighting for the first time in this very difficult country. You see, the 8th Army, we fought primarily up through the desert. Well, it was a beastly area. It was very hot. We were a long way from the sea. You couldn't get the children to bathe. We were fighting in this everlasting lava dust. And it was a very, very hard, wearisome, dull fighting there. And very difficult to make very much progress up against stiff resistance in difficult country.
In its eastward thrust, the 1st Division fights for Troina. It is a heavily defended town on top of a hill, like most in Sicily. In the fight, the enemy launches 24 separate counterattacks. The battle goes through August 3rd, August 4th, August 5th. Ernie Pyle writes, "Great clouds of dust and black smoke rose in the sky until the whole horizon was leaded and fogged. Our biggest bombs exploded, and our artillery in a great semicircle crashed and roared like some gigantic inhuman beast that had broken loose and was out to destroy the world." Troina falls only on August 6th, the day after Catania. It is in this charged atmosphere that George Patton slaps a battle-fatigued soldier, tells him to rejoin his unit, make a man of himself. At Eisenhower's command, Patton makes a public apology, but the episode almost costs his indignant country a bold and tested commander it will need. Even before Troina and Catania fall, the enemy is leaving Sicily. Along the north coast, the 3rd Division fights die-hard rear guards with tanks on the road, mules in the mountains, and landing craft on the shore. When Patton insists on an immediate landing at Brolo over the protest of Omar Bradley, his corps commander, it is touch and go for Truscott's troops.
This second landing, we hadn't gotten quite into position to where we could support the battalion, in my opinion, and I wanted to postpone the operation for a day. General Patton objected very strenuously and ordered me to go on with the operation, which I did. And just a little while afterwards, he came storming into my command post and giving everybody in sight, sound, and hearing hell, as a typical Patton way, and came up to where I was in my little trailer with General Keyes and several other members of my staff. And he says, "Damn it, Lucian, what's the matter with you? You afraid to fight?" And I bristled right back at him and said, "Why, General Patton, you know that isn't true. Of course I'm not afraid to fight. If you think you can find someone to command this division and do a better job than I can, find him." And General Patton said, "Oh, damn it, Lucian." Threw his arm around my neck, said, "Come on in, let's have a drink of your liquor." So we did. The landing operation went on, and we almost lost the battalion, but we did gain some time.
It will take another 6 days of wounds and death to reach Messina. The feats of the engineers become a legend.
The Germans had really pulled off one major demolition. They had blown off the whole face of the cliff. 150 feet of road just dropped into the sea. Well, it was quite an engineering feat. And the engineers said, "Oh, it'll take 3 days to repair this." I gave them until noon the next day. I already had a regiment crossing over the mountain farther up and heading on toward Messina. Well, they worked all night long on this thing. By noon the next day, they had a bridge.
The battle now is all but done. After Rome is bombed on July 19th, Del Duce, the ex-socialist who made the trains run on time, who made the Italians dream for 21 years, who stabbed his neighbor France in the back, is deposed on July 25th. Italy will soon surrender. We have inflicted 32,000 casualties on the Germans. The 38-day campaign cost the Allies 5,000 dead, 14,000 wounded. but men have been found and great divisions tested. The Germans are in retreat. Soon, Omar Bradley will be chosen to lead Americans across the English Channel. Patton, talented but temporarily disgraced, will later become great as Bradley's subordinate. The Mediterranean is safe. Italy is knocked from the war. The Allied plan has worked, but, ironically, so has the German plan. The Straits of Messina are never closed. The enemy drains his power from the broken flask of Sicily. The time he wins builds a series of defenses across the Italian mainland. The Allies dominate the sea and air, but torpedo boats, coastal guns, and one of the most dense concentrations of flak of the war hold our ships and planes at bay. The Lehrgang, the withdrawal of what Hitler calls his vital human material, goes on day and night. 40,000 Germans, 62,000 Italians escape. When Patton's patrols arrive on August 17th, Messina is being shelled from across the straits. The British arrive soon after. Although both Allies agreed to the strategy of the campaign, that empty harbor and the great escape cloud the bright memory of victory.
I doubt that their escape could have been prevented under the plan of operations in which we invaded Sicily. I think it's very probable had the original landing plan, which contemplated the Americans landing in the western tip for the capture of Palermo and the British landing farther up the southeastern coast, I think perhaps the not so many would have escaped.
Well, it's pretty easy to escape, isn't it? Unless, once they start to go back, unless you can produce enough landing craft to do amphibious operations around their back. We had very little of that at that moment, because all the landing craft, after the initial advance, was all taken away from us for other purposes. We hadn't got another airdrop to get in behind. The roads are very hard to get on. It's a mountainous country to go on. It's devilish easy to slip away and damned hard to cut them off and stop them doing it.
We were deeply disappointed in their success in getting across Messina. We thought when we got the island, we'd get all of them. But they withdrew, mostly at night, with pretty good ack-ack, and thus we were unable to intercept them. It was a disappointment to a lot of us who thought we'd get them and finish them there, but we had to fight them another day later.
Ahead lies Italy. Already Mark Clark's Fifth Army loads in Africa and Sicily for the Holocaust of Salerno. Soon Eisenhower and Alexander will send Montgomery up the Italian toe. Ahead is Cassino in its mountains, Anzio in its mud. Now Truscott's guns prepare the first artillery shells to land on the mainland. After 1 year and 9 months more, Truscott and Leese will lead the 5th and 8th Armies to final victory.